Welcome to all of you. I am Mr. Aditya Bhagat, Assistant Professor in the subject of Botany from the SVKT College, Devadalikhamp, Nasik. Today we have learned the topic that is ecology. So, first upon the session agenda of this today's topic. So, in this today's lecture, we will study the concept of ecology, then interrelationship between the living worlds and their environments, and level of organization as well as the components of ecosystem. So these are the today's session agenda. The learning objective of this today's session. So in that today's session, to learn the or to define the ecology, then to study the interaction between the living worlds and the environments, and as well as to describe the level of organisms and various components of ecosystem. So the first upon the concept of ecology. The word ecology, which is derived for the ecos, that means house, and logos means to study of. The simple definitions of this here, to study the house of the particular living organisms and their environments. So that is the ecology. So on the other side, the ecology, which is defined as the interrelationship between the organisms and to their environments surrounding to them. So according to the E.P. Odum, the study of structure and functions of nature, which is known as the ecology. So another definitions according to the Haeckel scientist, the study of relationship of organisms to the organic as well as the inorganic environments is known as the ecology. So the both definitions according to the E.P. Odums and Haeckel is here. So then interrelationship between the living worlds and the environments. So we can take the one example which is shown on this slide. This is the pond ecosystem. So in that pond ecosystem, there are the both components, likewise the biotic components, which is also known as the living components, and abiotic component, which is also known as the non-living components. The both components which can present in the pond ecosystem. So that means the biotic components which can depends on the abiotic components, and they can form the interrelationship among to them or between to them. So there are the various biotic components which is present in that pond ecosystem, such as the various zooplanktons, then fishes, then some mammals, some amphibians, which and one of the important like a producer or the plants are shown in this ecosystem. So these are the living components. On the other side, the non-living components which can also present like a sunlight, then temperature, water factor, etc. Or so all these living components or living organisms which can depends on this abiotic component. For example, the fish, then as well as the some lily plants which can depends on the water factor for example for their survive, reproductive as well as growth in nature. So the plants which is depends on the sunlight for their productions of food material in the presence of the sunlight as a abiotic factors. So this process is known as the photosynthesis. So that means this pond ecosystem which can shows that the interrelationship between the living worlds and the environment. That means the abiotic components as well as the biotic components which is the dependence to each other. So that forms the complex relationship between to them. So this is the interrelationship between the living worlds and the environments. So next one, the level of organization. So there are the various level of organization individual to biosphere. So now discuss the one by one. So first upon the individuals. The individuals which can include the single organisms or only the single organisms which is known as the individual of the level of organization. Then populations. The population means what? The collections of the individuals which is known as the population. Then after that the next level of organization, that is the community. The community it is also the complex systems of this the level of organization, that means which can include the different types of populations or whole the population which can makes the community. So this is the level of organization. Then see this diagram which is the forms the different types of population, different types of animals, different types of the plants and different types of as well as the biotic factor. All these things are includes in this type which is known as the community. After the community, that is the ecosystem. So ecosystem is the complex system in the ecology or in the environments, so which can includes the biotic as well as the abiotic components, and that ecosystem which can makes the different types of community like different types of organisms, different types of the abiotic factors that makes the ecosystem, and both are independent to each other for their survival purpose or adaptation to the nature. So after the ecosystem, next one is the biome. So the ecosystem, for example, the pond ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystem, then forest ecosystem. So all these ecosystems are the forms the particular regions or one types of region which is known as the biomes, and in that biome the both factors are also are present, like a biotic as well as the abiotic factor, different types of organism, different types of the animals which can shown in this the level of the organization, and this such a level of organization which is known as the biomes. After the biomes, that is last stage of the level of organization, that is the biosphere. Bio means living and sphere means the whole world. So in that whole world, the all the biomes community are formed together in nature, so they can produce the biosphere. So in that biosphere, there are the also the present of the various plants, various types of animals, then various types of the abiotic components. So all these things are present in the one types regions, and that particular regions or particular worlds which is known as the biosphere. So these are the level of organization in the ecology or the environments. So then moving to the next point, components of the ecosystem. So there are mainly two components of the ecosystem, like a biotic components and abiotic component. First upon, we study the biotic components of the ecosystem, which is also known as the living components of the ecosystem. The biotic components which can divided into the three groups: producer, consumer, and next third one is the decomposer. So in that producer which is also known as the autotrophic in nature, that means they can prepare their own food material for their nutrition purpose. So that means the organism that makes their own food, own foods, which the help of the process, that process is known as the photosynthesis. Then consumers. Consumer means what? The organisms that get their food by eating the producers or other consumers. That means the simple meaning of this consumer here, the consumers which can depends on the producer for their nutrition purposes. So that concept is known as the consumers. So in that consumer, they can again divide it into the four groups: primary consumer, secondary consumer, then third one is the tertiary consumers, and omnivores is last one. So primary consumers, they can feed directly on the plants, for example, which is also known as the herbivores. For example, deer is feed the directly plants, which is also known as the herbivores. Then goat is another example. Then secondary consumers, that means they can feed on the primary consumers. Tertiary consumers, which is feed on the secondary consumers, for example lions, tiger, etc. And last one is the omnivores, So omnivores, that means they can consume the or eat the both plant as well as animal. The well known example is human one. And the last one, the biotic components of the ecosystem is the decomposer. So decomposer is one of the important biotic components of the ecosystem. They can recycling the all these previously two groups, mainly consumers as well as producer. So decomposer means what? The organisms that get their own food by breaking down the dead plants as well as animal. And so the decomposers plays the important role for decaying or breaking the dead plants and animal in the environments, and they can recycling the all these systems, and the decomposing material they can also provide ultimately to the plants. The plants are again grows as a producer in nature, and the cycles starts from the here again producer to decomposer. So that is the uh, biotic components of this ecosystem. Then next one importance, the components, that is the abiotic factors, or which is also known as the physical factors or non-living factors in the environments or the ecosystem. So there are the various non-living components are present in these slides, like water, atmosphere, temperature, soil, sunlight as well as the wind. So water, first upon we discuss the water. So you know that the about the 70% of water earth surface is covered with the help of with the water in the form of the ocean, then rivers, streams, lakes, etc. So the water is the important part of the compositions of the living organisms, and so about the 70% of our body is made up of the water. So water is the most of the abundant resources which can present on the earth surface, and they are most important need for the all living things for their survival in nature. The presence of water is necessary for the several life processes such as the germinations of the seeds, then digestions and absorptions of the food material, as well as the removal of the water waste product, absorptions of various types of nutrient to the plants, and then circulations of the circulations of the substance in the body required as a water medium, through the water medium. So the amount of water is in the habitat, it affects the types of flora as well as the fauna which is found in that particular habitat systems. For example, there is the less vegetation in the desert area where the water is scarce, but on the other hands, in the area with gaining the high rainfalls and wide varieties of plants grow are thickly in nature, and they can form the tropical as a tropical rainforests because of the water is high amountly are present in that particular regions. So these are the water, and water is the important abiotic factor in the living system. So atmosphere, in that atmosphere there are the various gases are present, or importance ones as the air one. Air is the mixtures of the 21% of oxygen, 78% of nitrogen, and 0.03% of the carbon dioxide, as well as the 0.3 percentage of argons. So the air are contain the vapors and dust particle, and which protect us from the harmful effects of the UV ray. So air is the also important biotic factor. So you assume that the without the air, the life we know it would not be easily survive on the earth because of the some of the carbon dioxides which can present in the atmosphere, and the harmful of this carbon dioxide which is harmful to the human one, and this harmful of this carbon dioxide are absorbed by the plants from the atmosphere, and these atmospheric CO2 which can use for the produce of the food material as a carbohydrates. So on the other side, the plants they release the oxygen to the atmosphere. So all the living things utilize the oxygens for the respirations. The combustions also makes use the oxygens as a burning. The plants once more they utilize the carbon dioxide created by the respiration and the burning of the fossil fuels and the decompositions of organic materials for the photosynthesis. So atmosphere is another the important abiotic factor. Then temperature. The temperature on the surface of the earth is varies as a greatly. The each types of creature can only withstand the certain range of temperature. That means the temperature varies on the atmosphere as the season by season one. So all these types of temperatures or optimum temperature which can necessary for the reproduction as well as growth and developments of the various types of plants. So temperature is also importance of the abiotic factor for the growth and development purpose of the plants. Then soil factor. Thus soil factor, which is also known as the edaphic factors, due to the fact of the soil which is the essential to plants for many of their needs. They can nutrition purpose, growth as well as development purposes. It is very significant the environmental elements. All of the essential mineral nutrients for the plants as well as the animal growth and developments are present in the soils. The earth are provide the water to the plants as well. The wide range of the living creatures including the earthworm, insect, fungi and bacteria can be found in the good soil in nature, and additionally it contains the humus which is composed of the different types of animal as well as the plant that remains have the died and decomposed one materials like as the humus, and humus makes the soil is the productive as well as the to increase the fertility of the soil. So that is the soil as the abiotic factors. Then light. So the light which is provided by the sun on the plant and which is also the main as well as the most important source of the light energy. They can provide the heat as a light us. The only living things that can absorb and use the solar energy to produce the foods are the green plants. Those sunlight which is the absorbed by the producer, that is the green plants, for making their food purposes. Through the natural food chain, this energy that plants store in the foods they produce is transferred to every other the living organisms. On the other ways, the light affects the plant as well as the animals are likewise a numerous light effects wide range of the processes then including the stomata opening as well as the closing. So the different types of plants which can opening the stomata in the daytime, but the cam which is the essential plants in that camp plants the stomata are open during the night time and closing during the daytime. So also the important as the seed germination, flowering, animal movement, sleeping as well as the feeding in nature. So the some are the refer as the natural nocturnal animals such as the earthworms and cockroaches because they can active at the night and shine at the light time. So the light which is also the influence activity of the animal behavior. So light is the also important abiotic factors of this particular ecosystems one or the environment one. Then wind. So wind is also the importance abiotic components in that ecosystem. The mainly they can transfer the seed from one place to another place and ultimately they can grow to the particular place one. So that is the pollination, which is concept is known as the pollination. So these are the abiotic factors of this ecosystem. Then student assignment. Here the two questions which is shown on these slides. Students, you will be solve the define the ecology as well as to define the ecosystems. Then the briefly explain the components of ecosystem. We also study in that previous slides, such as there are the two important components of the ecosystem, biotic as well as the abiotic components, and which can explain in this question. The summary of these today's lectures. In that today's lecture, we will discuss the concept of ecology, also study the two different types of definitions according to the different scientists of the ecology. Then also study the discuss the briefly in interrelationship between the living worlds and the environment with the help of the example like as the pond ecosystem. And last one, we study the level of organization and briefly discuss the various components of ecosystem such as the biotic as well as the abiotic components of the ecosystem. So in that next lecture or sessions, we will discuss or study the definitions of biodiversity or the concept of biodiversity. Then also discuss the various types of biodiversity and the conservations of biodiversity. Thank you everyone.